All right. Well, thank you all so much this afternoon for joining. As I said just a minute ago, my name's Matthew Smith. I serve as Senior Vice President with Sudan Relief Fund. I think some folks will continue to trickle in here, but I think just out of respect for everyone who's joined already's time, we'll go ahead and get started. Today, I'll be walking you all through my most recent travels to South Sudan and Sudan. The goal being to give you a sense of the projects and the status of how things are going in this part of the world. And then also, as well, I got so many thoughtful questions from participants who signed up for the webinar this year. It'll be about 30 minutes or so, hopefully maybe closer to 40. With some photos and video from my most recent trip. And then at the end, I'll have the opportunity to answer some of the thoughtful questions that you all sent in. If I don't get to your question, or if you think of something else while I'm speaking, please reach out to me directly. At the end, I'll have my contact information available, and you can reach out directly to me because I'd love to answer any questions you might have. I was in South Sudan and Sudan for a couple of weeks in the end of April into the beginning of May. So what I'll do here is I'll walk you through my trip as well as the locations and the various locations I went to. We start our trip here in the city of Juba. They now have over 700 students that they're serving. And that extra 200, they're all children who have come from North Sudan, who are fleeing the war. And this was something I heard time and time again during my travels. Various projects that we went to was we're seeing this incredible influx of people who are fleeing the war. And so for context, in North Sudan, there is a brutal war that's happening. That war is, let me get to my map. So here in North Sudan, there's a brutal civil war that is happening. And that war is taking place between two rival military factions. And as a result, it has forced upwards of 10 million people from their home. An almost unimaginable number of people have been displaced from where they live due to fighting. That is, there's no desire or want of their own. These two military factions have pushed 10 million people from their homes, many of whom are coming to South Sudan. And South Sudan is the poorest country in the world. It's got a GDP per capita of about $450, which is about 50% poorer than the second poorest country. And so that gives you a scale of the conditions in South Sudan, and the fact that people are coming to the poorest country in the world gives you a sense of just how bad the fighting is in North Sudan. And so these sisters said that they're receiving plenty of children who have been fleeing the war. Here is the inside of the school, which you can see, and soon that school will have new desks and there will be children there, and they'll be able to use this facility here for their studies. And, despite the fact that South Sudan is the poorest country in the world, you still see smiling faces, you still see joy, which is pretty inspiring and frankly, at times awe-inspiring, the fact that you'd still see smiles despite these conditions. We also had the opportunity to go out to Catholic University of South Sudan, which you can see here. Now, you might be looking at these photos saying, Matt, these are just photos of you in front of a wall. And you'd be right. These are photos of a new wall that we just constructed outside of the Catholic University of South Sudan, which Sudan Relief Fund has been involved with since its inception. Now, a wall in a place like South Sudan is incredibly important, and especially in a place like Juba, where crime is rampant, lawlessness is rampant. South Sudan is one of the most dangerous countries in the world. And so a secure wall around the perimeter of the university goes a long way in protecting the students and making them feel secure during their studies, especially young women who are invulnerable and who otherwise may not want to walk to class if they feel their safety is at risk when they're doing their studies. And so we constructed this new wall and we were able to see its completion, which was fantastic. And so from Juba, we went north. And we actually crossed the border of Sudan to this little dot here, Gadel, which is where the Mother of Mercy Hospital is, which is the only referral hospital in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. Sudan Relief Fund has been a part of this hospital now for many years, and Dr. Tom Katina is the surgeon here at the hospital, the only surgeon. And he's been serving in the Nuba Mountains for about 15 years. Now, the Nuba Mountains are home to about 1.5 million people. They're an ethnically distinct group that has long been targeted by the Sudanese government because they are ethnically different than the rest of Sudan. There's been an attempted genocide on the Nuba people. And so the conditions here in Goodell and in the Nuba Mountains are very challenging, very harsh. It's extremely remote, one of the hardest places in the world to reach. Sudan Relief Fund supplies all of the medicine at this hospital in Goodell. And so we had the opportunity to go up and visit with Dr. Tom at the hospital. And so to get there, you fly to a little town called Yida, which is right here on the border of the two countries. You then get into a vehicle and you drive between 8 to 16 hours, depending on the conditions of the road at that time, up into the Nuba Mountains to the Mother of Mercy Hospital. So here you can see, this is actually the plane that we flew. This is on the landing strip in Yida. We land here, we collect our belongings, and then we began our drive. Now, Dr. Tom, had actually reached out to our team ahead of time and said, hey, we are in dire need of cancer medicines here at the hospital. And so we were actually able to bring some cancer medicines with us, which you can see here in this photo. We were able to bring them in our plane with us, transport them in our vehicle up to the hospital, where we were then able to deliver them to Tom. This is actually the vehicle that we took up. We were able to get a photo. You can see it's extremely dry, extremely arid. This part of Sudan is remarkably hot. And this was actually on the drive here. Hopefully you guys can see this video. Maybe it's a little choppy, but this is just, you can hopefully get a glimpse of how barren it is in this part of Sudan. It's incredibly dry, incredibly arid. It's about 115 degrees the day that we were there. And just really harsh conditions. And we were able to actually make it up. The roads were in decent conditions. We were able to make it up to the hospital in about 8 or 9 hours. And that's just to get up there. For long stretches of the year, the hospital is actually inaccessible because whenever it rains, the roads become so poor because it's just a dirt path. And so we have to coordinate our shipments of medicine when the roads are good. You can see here, this is just what life in Nuba looks like. Here's some huts that are built into the mountains here, and you get a sense of what some local living looks like. And here's Dr. Tom, an American doctor who, as I said, has been serving in Sudan for over 15 years. And he's seen it all. His hospital has been bombed. He's had to dive into foxholes. He has seen everything under the sun in the Nuba Mountains. And he labors every day from morning until night. And when I sat down with him, when I had the chance to visit, he said to me, Matt, this is the worst that I've ever seen Sudan. And that means a lot coming from someone who's been there as long as he has. And so that gives you a sense of just how dire the conditions are there right now due to the war. This is actually, we took a photo of Tom. This is Tom here on the left. His wife, Nasima, who is a nurse at the hospital, on the right. And their adopted son, Francis. And this was up near where they sleep. They're actually sitting on what would be a traditional bed here for the Nuba people. And every day we follow Tom in. He goes from morning to night. This was following Tom in to the hospital. And we've got some audio here. I think the audio might be a little hard to hear, but just so you get a visual, this is following Tom into the hospital, so you can kind of see this was our walk-in. And as I said, he starts every day at about 6 a.m. and he goes until the sun gets down. And it's not uncommon to actually hear, him in the middll of the night at 2, 3 a.m. coming down from his hut with his flashlight, and you'll see him walking in because he just gets calls all through the night for people that are coming in on. He has to be on call at any hour of the day. And you see it all. He's treating everything under the sun at this hospital. He's treating newborns. He's treating new mothers. He's treating gunshot wounds. He's treating war victims. He's treating tuberculosis patients. He's treating malaria patients. He has to be an expert in everything all at the same time, all in one day. And that's what makes his work pretty remarkable. And so this was heading into this is actually the women's ward. And oftentimes patients are 2 to 3 per bed. And it's extremely crowded, it's hot, and it is just a very harsh place. But what you can see here too is that he's got folks that are around him that are now serving with him. So you can kind of see, maybe you saw in that last video, I'll show another slide here in a minute. He's got help now in the form of local Nuba doctors who have gone and studied in Kenya and Nairobi and Uganda and are now coming back to the Nuba Mountains to serve the people. And to me, that's remarkable. Folks that have been given the opportunity to study elsewhere, to leave Nuba, one of the most remote places in the world, and go to a place like Kenya or Uganda, are now coming back to Nuba to serve. They're a proud people, and they want to come back and they want to help because they know that their people are in need. So you can see here, this photo, this shows, there's people inside, there's people outside, there's people on the floor, there's 2 to 3 to a bed at times. It's extremely crowded. And for an area of 1.5 million people, and now an additional 700,000 new refugees that have come to the area, Tom still serves as the only surgeon, but he does have now some help in the form of other physicians. This woman, she had the most remarkable story, and each person that I encountered here at the hospital and that I sat down and spoke with, they all have such incredible stories that you could fill up the pages of books with, truly. You could write a movie script about each one of their stories. This woman, she has stage 4 cancer, and she was being treated in a hospital in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. And the hospital was bombed. And so her sister, who is just out of focus here in the top of the frame, she and her brother-in-law carried her sister all the way down from Khartoum. They carried her, they hitchhiked, they walked, any sort of combination of things to get to this hospital in the Nuba Mountains, because so many people know, if I can just get to that hospital there in the south, in the Nuba Mountains there, towards the south of the country, I know that there's a doctor there that will provide compassionate care. And so they made it to the hospital, and now she's receiving care from Dr. Tom and the staff here at Mother of Mercy Hospital. And her story was like so many others, remarkable resilience, but ultimately just trying to find compassionate care. This is a photo I took that I really like, because it gives you a sense of how things are changing at the hospital and the help now that Tom is getting. All these folks around him here are learning from Tom, and you can't even see Tom. He's actually out of frame. You can maybe see the top of his head here right in the center of the photo. And he's teaching everybody while he's also seeing patients. And so you get a sense of all these folks are local Nuba people who are learning to be doctors from one of the best in the world, Dr. Tom, and then they will then be able to assist at the hospital as well. And he, of course, as I said, you see it all, babies in all sorts of conditions, and Tom is there saving lives each and every day. This is the new pediatric ward that we've recently helped construct with open air here, which is necessary in this part of the world, just considering the diseases. This little boy, now, I originally thought that this boy had lost his legs due to possibly disease or something like similar. What I came to find out later was that this boy had actually lost his legs because his school, about 20 miles away in the village of El Hadra, had been bombed. And he lost his legs in this bombing. The Sudanese government had bombed their own citizens, had bombed their own civilians, and a school building with that. And this little boy lost his legs in the bombing. Some of his classmates lost their life. The teachers lost their lives. And he was rushed to Mother of Mercy Hospital, and his life was saved. Of course, he lost his legs, but you can even see his mother in the top right of the frame here, who is smiling. And there was still joy, because they knew that if it weren't for Dr. Tom, their boy probably would have been lost, but he still survives, even though he's got the wounds of this bombing still. And this is the morning of our departure. Our executive vice president, David, Dr. Tom, and myself. And then from there, we actually drove to a different part of the Nuba Mountains, where we were able to actually visit one of the expansion clinics that Sudan Relief Fund has been in partnership with Mother of Mercy Hospital. Now, this clinic is in a very remote part of the Nuba Mountains. It's run by this Dutch doctor here, Dr. Ingrid, in the left side of the frame. And it's one of around 20 or so clinics around the hospital that we have helped construct and stock with medicines that will serve people so that they don't have to walk to the main hospital. You think if someone has malaria or a snake bite and it's urgent to get treated, they can't afford to walk 2.5 to 3 days to get to the main hospital. And so they can come to one of these clinics and be served here, which will save lives. And it was a cool moment to walk to one of these clinics and walk into the little pharmacy where they're handing out medicines and to see Sudan Relief Fund branded boxes with medicines inside. It was a full circle moment from our donors who generously fund this medicine to then go and see it delivered in person in one of the most remote places on earth, saving lives was pretty special. And this is just pretty meager, but it is delivering life-saving medicines to folks who otherwise, again, would have to walk days to get there to the main hospital. And this is evidence of stock shelves full of medicine. And we had the chance to visit with the nursing staff there, ask questions, and get a sense of the challenges that they're facing, especially with the influx of refugees that have come to this area. And we went to visit one of the camps nearby. So just a stone's throw from that expansion clinic is this camp here. Now, this camp services about 30,000 people. And normally when you see one of these refugee camps, you see evidence of a lot of NGOs, UN, World Food Program. But this camp is so remote in the Juba Mountains, it's really just folks have kind of ended up here because they fled the war and they've helped build some straw huts and they've hand dug some latrines, and that's pretty much the state of things in this camp. Conditions were extremely harsh. And so that little clinic that I just showed you photos of, that's going to be servicing folks here, the 30,000 people at this refugee camp. And they received a shipment of food while we were there. And what I heard from folks here in line was that this was the first shipment of food that they had seen since the beginning of January. And when I was here, it was at the end of April. And so, frankly, it's hard to imagine how people are surviving on such little food. But that is life here in the Juba Mountains. Now, I had the chance to visit with this woman. I was going to play the video. I think the audio might be a little challenging to hear. And so I will just walk you through this short interview that I did with her. She came from Khartoum, and what she explains to me in this interview is that she had lost her leg when her home was bombed. She has 3 children, all under the age of 11, 3 daughters. They were living in Khartoum peacefully. Their home was bombed. She lost her leg. And so she had to hitchhike with her 3 young daughters all the way down Sudan. And she ended up here at this refugee camp in the Juba Mountains. And again, it's another story of resilience that it's hard to imagine. And it's incredibly inspiring to see the resilience that these folks exhibit on a daily basis in such conditions. And so Sudan Relief Fund feels privileged, frankly, to be able to partner and serve these folks in this part of the world. And this is myself and David and the chief of the refugee camp on the right, speaking with some of the victims of war and the refugees here in the Juba Mountains. And one thing that will always stand out to me on this day was just how hot it was. It was about 115 degrees. That was about the real feel. Our photographer who we were with, he had a camera with him, and the internal temperature reading on that camera was approaching 150 degrees, 50. And if it had gotten just a little bit hotter, it would have actually melted the camera. That's how hot it was. And these are the conditions every day that these folks are forced to live in. And that was the end of our time in the Juba Mountains. We then actually went to this town called Malakal in the upper right portion of South Sudan. You hopefully can see Malakal right here. It is bordering again it is right on the border of Sudan, and so you can imagine that it's also receiving lots and lots of refugees from this war. And here at the camp that we visited, they told us that they were receiving over 10,000 people per month, at times, sometimes 1,000 people a day at this camp. Now, I visited this camp exactly 1 year ago. And when I visited, there was very little infrastructure at the time. There was people sitting under the trees, and the diocese of Malakal, who we're partnering with here, was providing some food aid and some shelter, but it was pretty sparse. 1 year later, this camp has been completely built out. There's thousands and thousands of people here, and the diocese is conducting a feeding program every day to help feed these victims of war. And they are also running a boat to and from the border of Sudan. And Sudan Relief Fund has been paying for the fuel for this boat to run to and from the border of Sudan to rescue people who are fleeing the war, going to the town of Rumbeck, which is right on the border of the two countries, and bringing them to safety. This is a Comboni sister, Sister Elena, and our team here, Frederick on the right, David on the left, myself in the middle. And you can see just out of frame here the boat that the diocese runs to and from the border to help care for these victims of war and bring them to safety. Now, our team put together a short video, which I'm going to hopefully show to you all here. I hope you all can hear the audio. But I'm going to show you, it's a 3-minute video, and it hopefully will give you a sense of the conditions here in the camp.
We are at the Bulukat transit camp in Malakal town for those who are coming back, fleeing the conflict in the Sudan. The war in Sudan has caused the largest displacement in the world in our times. At the peak of the crisis, at the peak of the war in Sudan, there were about 4,000 to 5,000 people crossing the border from Sudan to South Sudan on daily basis. Per day.
When the war broke out, everybody ran away with nothing, and they come with nothing. So they need to be assisted with shelter, with food, with anything, even clothing. We are receiving thousands of people, and the diocese is helping them, feeding them almost every day when they arrive.
So in a transit camp like this, they stay until they find transport for their final destination. The transport could be by air or by boat, the river transport. We have about 1,000 people crossing the border to South Sudan every day.
The children need also medical assistance and many other things that necessities of human life. So the needs are tremendous and great enough.
Realistically speaking, a contribution of $20,000 per month would cover the needs that we intended to cover. Not all the needs, but what we can manage as the Caritas Office, the Diocese of Malakal.
Really, I'm very grateful and very happy because of Sudan Relief Fund. Whenever you come to the diocese and whenever we approach you, it doesn't take 2 months or 1 month or even a week. You always intervene quickly because you know already that someone needs to eat today, not tomorrow. And we are very grateful for this assistance and for this intervention, which is very great. Thank you.
And so hopefully that gives you a visual sense of the camp and just how crowded, just how built out it is now and the needs that are present. And so as Sister Elena said in that video, it doesn't take much to run a feeding program for the folks here. And you can do a lot with a little in a place like South Sudan, especially at a transit camp like I'm showing you here. And so Sudan Relief Fund is going to be and will continue to provide support to run the feeding program here at the camp. We had the chance to be there while they were conducting a feeding. And so this video, which was also featured in the last video here a bit, just shows you this is what the feeding program looks like. Folks are just lining up. They get a small ration per day, a little bit of oil, a little bit of flour, not much, but enough to just get by. So we were able to spend an afternoon here at the camp, which was really powerful. And again, just incredible resilience that these folks are exhibiting. They've been displaced from their home. They've been forced to a place probably that they've never been to or don't know, not familiar with, and they're forced to live on little rations each day. And yet they still have positivity, smiles. You still see children playing, running around. Life still is going on. I love this guy here. He's just like kids all over the world. He still finds toys to play with. He attached a string to a box here, walking around with it. Life, like I said, still goes on. And so from Malakal, we went west. We went to this bottom left corner here in South Sudan, bordering the Central African Republic and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We went to Inzara. Here in Inzara, we've been partnering with a number of projects for years now, including the St. Nikita Orphanage. This is Sister Bianca B. She is part of an order called the Blue Sisters, and she runs an orphanage here that cares for dozens and dozens of children who have lost their parents. She was previously in a place called Tombra, but there was an outbreak of violence and we had to move her. And so we've now moved her to Inzara, the orphans and her, and we've built this big campus of a couple of buildings for her and the orphans. And it's really a special place. And I was able to go and visit. We've got the girls' dormitory here on the left. There's an identical boys' dormitory that looks just like this, as well as staff quarters. You can see the kitchen here, which is just about completed here on the right. And then we also will be building a multi-purpose hall here in the middle. And we're thrilled to be able to partner with Bianca on this project. She has such a loving heart for these orphans. And there are so many orphans in a place like South Sudan where health conditions are so poor, disease runs rampant, maternal care and maternal mortality is extremely high. And these are some of the little ones here in this photo. The other children were actually in school when we went and visited. And so many of the children weren't there when we visited. But it's part of our strategy to have this orphanage strategically close by to the schools and even to the hospital. And so these children can be going to school and then be able to walk back to the orphanage. I love this photo. This is Bianca just expressing her gratitude and thanks with our program coordinator, Fred, who they've known each other for many, many years. And just a real genuine moment of happiness. You can see the staff quarters actually behind me here out of frame. But it's really a wonderful project that we get to partner with Bianca on, and we're so privileged, really, with the help of our donors to be able to construct this campus for these orphans, because Bianca has such a heart and every day wakes up thinking, how can I serve? Like so many of our partners in South Sudan, that's her attitude. Nearby, we have the Inzara Hospital. Sudan Relief Fund, along with Catholic Medical Mission Board, partners with us here at this hospital, and we are primarily invested in maternal care here. We are one of the main funders of the Safe Motherhood program here at Inzara Hospital. South Sudan has the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. And so as a result, it is imperative at local hospitals to provide improving maternal care. And so we've heavily invested in that. And we've been able to see some wonderful results here at Inzara Hospital of babies that I'm confident otherwise would have lost their lives be saved because of this. I mean, small premature babies who are really struggling health-wise are given good care and ultimately go on to live healthy and happy lives because they've been receiving care here at Inzara Hospital. I kind of want one of these polos. I love this here. You've got the CMMB logo here on the left. You got the Sudan Relief Fund logo here, as well as one of our other partners, Edmund Rice Foundation, on the polo. This is one of the nurses at the hospital. From there, we went and visited with a group of Comboni sisters who run an HIV community program for some of the children here in Inzara who have HIV. They also run a program for adults who have HIV. They do vocational training. They have a bakery actually on site where they teach skills to adults who have HIV to equip them with vocational skills to be able to provide for themselves. And they're just, again, loving servants of their community who've been there for many, many years. We also got to visit a Comboni secondary school here. We see the school. I remember when I visited this school 1 year ago, it was quite literally crumbling, some of the walls. A lot of brick was crumbling, and it's clear they needed a new school. And so 1 year later, it was really cool to come back and see this newly completed school building, as well as see the students. They were actually doing their final exams when we were there. We pulled them out during their exams. Like, you can kind of see it on some of their faces, the stress of exams. But this is a part of our strategy to invest in education in South Sudan. It would be very easy to exclusively focus on the dire humanitarian needs, which are very important: food, water, medicine, shelter. But we try to partner and combine that with investments in things like education, because otherwise you have to make investments in the future leaders of this country. Otherwise, there's no hope for the future for this young country. From Inzara, we went to Yambio, which you can see here at the bottom of the map. In Yambio, we got to see this recently completed water well. Visiting these wells are a real moment of celebration. This well was donated by a church in Louisiana, and these students were telling me that they had incredible problems with typhoid. Typhoid's not something I've ever thought about really in my entire life, and yet that was a present danger and reality for the students here in Yambio. So this well, which you can see the tower here, and then the water, it's solar powered, and it will come out the water points here. I'll show you here in a second. But it services the school and the students, but it also services the wider community. And so thousands of people will be able to access clean water. And you can see there's 3 little water spigots here where clean water comes out. It's a real moment of celebration and joy to be able to see folks actually drink from the well, drink from it myself, and something as simple as clean water. It sparks celebrations in a place like South Sudan. This was a water well also in Yambio we constructed a little bit ago. I was able to go and see it, pump water from it myself. And again, these are the moments that I get a lot of joy from, because I can see it on the faces of the children, the women, who oftentimes are the ones responsible for going and fetching water, just how thankful they are to have something as simple as this in their community. And from Yambio, we made the short drive, about an hour drive, to Rumbeck here on the map. And in Rumbeck, we got to visit with the Our Lady of Assumption Primary and Secondary School, which is run by a group of Ugandan Christian brothers. They've been serving in South Sudan for many years, and this school is a shining example of an educational facility in an area where there are little to no other educational opportunities. They have a primary school and a secondary school now that serves over 1,000 students, many of which are boarding at the school as well. This is the secondary students here. They were actually doing classes here in the grass outside when we visited, but that won't be the case for much longer, because they have a new secondary school building that Sudan Relief Fund, with the partnership of our donors, is helping construct. And this is actually on the site of the new secondary school, which is going up as we speak. And we hope that it will be completed here very soon. This is the headmaster of the school on the right, Brother Achilles, who's one of, I think, my favorite folks here in South Sudan. It's got a pretty cool name too. And he's really running an incredible school here in one of the most remote places on the planet. This is actually a new multi-purpose hall that we recently finalized as well at the school. Our last stop on the trip was to Rumbeck, which you can see here in the middle of the map. Rumbeck is right in the middle of South Sudan. And in Rumbeck, I had the wonderful opportunity to spend time with the Missionary Sisters of Charity, the order founded by Mother Teresa. And these sisters are remarkable. It's a shining example of the poor serving the poor. They ask for nothing, and they give everything that they have to serve the people. And they have an orphanage that they run, which is one of the only orphanages in that entire region that will accept babies. And they also have a leper colony where they serve, which is about 45 minutes outside of town. And so they are serving both the orphans. And at the orphanage, they don't just have orphans. They also take in elderly folks, those folks that have mental handicaps. So they take in everybody that has a need. And again, they ask for nothing. And so Sudan Relief Fund, we are so privileged to partner with these women. And as I said, it's one of the only places in Rumbeck that will accept children. And there's about 60 or so children here. There's about 15 to 20 girls who have mental disabilities, and then there's another group of elderly folks who also need care that the sisters provide for. Just really cute kids as well. And I was really pleased to see the new multi-purpose hall that Sudan Relief Fund, with the help of a very generous donor out in Texas, helped us construct, which was just completed. And so we had the chance to go and see this new multi-purpose hall, which is actually here. So I remember 2 years ago when I visited the sisters and the orphans, many of them were just sitting outside under a mango tree. And it was clear that in the heat of the day, they needed somewhere to be able to sit that wasn't just outside. And so we've constructed this new multi-purpose hall with generosity of our donors, and it was a real moment of celebration to get to see them be putting it to use. It's got a kitchen, a storage room, an area for the men, the women, and the children to sit during the day. And it was a real nice moment as well. And you can see here the women who, again, otherwise would be just outside, sitting in the heat of the day, having this new building. We then also went out to the leper colony, and that was our final stop on the trip. The sisters here care for the lepers. There's a little over 200 lepers in this leper colony, but there are thousands of people that live in the colony. So it's not just the lepers, it's also their immediate and extended family. Many times, it's not just the lepers that are cast out of society, it's their entire families. And so they're sent out to wander. And so this leper colony has been organized. There's a couple of thousand people who live here in Malo, and the sisters about 3 to 4 times a week travel out to the colony to help them. They bring simple medicines, they bring food, they help teach the little children. And it's really vibrant here at this leper colony. And Sudan Relief Fund, we're privileged to partner with the sisters here to help care for the lepers. But of course, everywhere you look, you see the physical tolls of what leprosy can do to someone. One of the things that we're helping the sisters with is constructing new huts or tukels for the lepers as well. So this woman, she was very proud of her new tukel here, really well done, well constructed hut. And has leprosy, but she and her family have a new home now here at the Malo Leper Colony, and I can tell how much it meant to them. And so your donation, support, partnership with us is helping go towards things like this that are really helping to save lives and change lives for the better in this remote part of South Sudan. And it was just such a privilege and a joy to get to see the sisters interact with the young children. As I said, they actually go out and teach the little ones as well a couple of times a week. And so they are giving their everything. Every day they wake up again, like so many others, and think, how can I serve? And it was a privilege to get to spend some time out at the colony and interact with little children there as well. We also got to hear from the chief of the leper colony, who expressed his thanks and appreciation to Sudan Relief Fund and our donors for their generosity and support. And it was a real culmination of the trip to get to be with the sisters, go to the leper colony, and see across all these different areas, healthcare, education, care for orphans, what the sisters are doing here in Rumbeck. It was a real remarkable conclusion to our trip. And so that was it. I then departed, came back to the United States, have been catching up on some sleep ever since. These trips are long, they're hot, they're hard, but I come back very excited and emboldened by the things that I see. I'm encouraged at the progress that's being made, and yet, of course, the needs are still significant. And I want you, anyone here who's on our call today, and anyone who you may share this with, to know that if you ever have any questions or comments, or you'd like to follow up on anything that I shared today, please reach out to me directly. My contact information here is on the screen, and I would love to hear from you. And if you're interested in making a difference by making a donation, please reach out to me. If there's a particular project that you think is of particular interest to you, whether that's the leper colony, a clean water well, partnering with us with medicines at Dr. Tom's Hospital, and you want to partner with us on something specific, please reach out to me as well. I'd love to hear from you. Now, I did get a number of really fantastic questions in the lead up to this presentation from folks who signed up and submitted questions with the form that they used to sign up. And I've got a few here. And to end here, I would love to be able to answer a few questions. And one of the questions that I received was, what was the biggest change that you saw since your last visit? And that is an easy one for me to answer, frankly. And it's the volume of displaced people that I saw while I was there. You know, a year ago, the war in Sudan had just started, and you were starting to see the effects of war. But now, 1 year later, traveling back to South Sudan and to Sudan and seeing everywhere you look, every project that we are involved in is feeling the impact and effects of the war, most notably with the sheer volume of people that have come into South Sudan and other parts of Sudan fleeing the war. And that was easily the biggest change that I saw. Another fantastic question was, what is the government doing to help? You know, there's so many needs, and is the government doing anything? And sad to answer that question in the negative. The government in South Sudan is unfortunately not doing much to care for its own people, and it ranks as one of the highest corrupt governments in the world. Not a list you want to be on, but it is an incredibly corrupt government. Fortunately, they do kind of get out of the way of our work, so our work is not inhibited necessarily by the government in South Sudan, but they're not taking active steps to help their people. And I do think if we want to see this young country grow and prosper, that there will need to be new leadership and new leaders that take on the mantle in South Sudan. And my hope is that maybe it's someone from Catholic University that will go into leadership and go into the government and work in the public sector and start to change the course of this young country. Maybe it's someone that's an orphan that goes on to get an education, who's been impacted by the Missionary Sisters of Charity or other projects that we're involved in. And so that's my hope for the country, that while the government is not doing much now, that down the road, we'll see young moral leaders start to take up positions in authority that will then begin to turn the tide in South Sudan. Another great question that I received, someone said, "What's your model in getting aid to those in need, and how is it different than any of the other groups that are working in this part of the world?" And I'm so glad that question got asked, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about is how Sudan Relief Fund and what we do with the help of our donors is a little bit different than other aid organizations. You know, we work directly with the missionaries that are on the ground in South Sudan, providing immediate relief in contact with those the missionaries that we work with. They reach out to us. They say, you know, Matt, here's what I'm seeing. And then we work directly with them to provide funds and resources for them to be able to then meet the needs that they're seeing. You know, these are folks, these missionaries that we work with, they've often been serving in South Sudan for many, many years. And so they certainly know the needs even more than I do. And so we have direct relationships through the Catholic Church and the missionaries there on the ground in South Sudan. And so we're able to work directly through them. And that's how we're able to be most effective and use the resources that we've been given as an organization by our donors most effectively on the ground in South Sudan and in the Juba Mountains. And finally, I'll end with a really great question too here that was, what are the best ways to help? And it can seem overwhelming, you know, even for someone like myself who's in this line of work, who's gone to South Sudan now a handful of times. It can seem overwhelming. You know, where do we start? What are the best ways to help? And one of the ways, I think, is by sharing what's happening in this part of the world with people in your network, people in your church, your friends, your family. South Sudan and Sudan, it's a forgotten place on the map. And I struggle to think of a place on earth where there are more people in need than South Sudan and this region of the world. It's not really covered in the news, unfortunately, and frankly, many people don't even know where it is. And so by you just showing an interest, by joining the webinar today, you've raised your hand and said, hey, I'm interested. I care about what's happening in this part of the world. And one thing that you can do to immediately help is share this information with others. This webinar will be recorded. We'll send it out as a link, and you can share it with others and tell people about what's happening in South Sudan and this part of the world. And of course, if you're able and feel led to, you can certainly partner with us with a donation as well, whether it's Sudan Relief Fund or any of the other good charities that work in this part of the world. A little goes a very long way. And I caution you to ever think, oh, well, my little bit can't make a difference in this part of the world, because it certainly can. And if you have questions or that of interest to you, of course, as I said, you can reach out to me directly. So thank you so much again for joining this afternoon. Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Thank you for, as I said, just raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm interested in what's happening in South Sudan. I want to help make a difference. And so appreciate your time this afternoon. And as I said, if you have any follow-ups, please reach out to me directly. But until next time, thank you so much. God bless you all and take care.